To breaking news now. Israel has struck a decisive blow against Hamas, announcing its soldiers in Gaza have killed the terrorist group's leader, Yahya Sinwar.
Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar was credited with orchestrating the terrorist attack on Israel last October, which left 1,200 people dead. Well, Israel got their revenge this week, killing Sinwar during an operation in the southern city of Rafah on Wednesday local time. Joining me now to unpack what it all means is global futurist and foreign affairs expert Dr. Keith Suter. Dr. Suter, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay, let's start with who exactly was Yahya Sinwar and how he fits into the picture with Hamas.
Well, he was the leader of Hamas, and he was actually in the Gaza Strip, and certainly was the number one terrorist that the Israelis were looking for. So this has been a very successful operation. Ironically, it seems to have been done by accident. They were simply attacking a building and then suddenly realized that, in fact, one of the dead bodies could actually be Yahya Sinwar, and so they had to remove part of his finger for DNA testing. He'd been held for several years in Israeli captivity at one point, so they had his dental records and a sample of DNA, which made the identification very quick, and they confirmed that, in fact, they had got the number one terrorist target they were looking for.
Now, I guess it's interesting to me to try and unpack how significant this is. And I look at some of the things that have been said outside of the Middle East. Ex-CIA Director David Petraeus went as far as to say the elimination of Sinwar was bigger than the operation that killed Osama bin Laden by US Special Forces in 2011. How significant is Sinwar's death?
It is significant, but it's worth bearing in mind that Hamas will continue the struggle. So you've really got a number of conflicting interpretations on this. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is saying the struggle will continue, and he's after the complete destruction of Hamas and the return of the remaining hostages, which are about 100 or so. So he wants to continue the struggle. On the other hand, you've got people in the Biden administration who are wanting to have the war ended as quickly as possible, because their fear is that disillusioned Arab Americans may not be voting in the election, and that might end up with Trump winning. And so they're saying to the Israeli government, look, take this as a victory. It's been a successful operation. Now you can just let the war wind down to some sort of ceasefire. But you've got a difference of opinion. Hamas are not interested in a ceasefire. They want to continue fighting now, whereas at the other extreme, you've got the Israeli Prime Minister, who's also not interested in a ceasefire either. He wants to continue with this run of successes that they've been enjoying and continue on to try to destroy Hamas. The basic problem is that we still don't know what the post-Hamas conflict period will look like in Gaza. Who's going to run Gaza when the fighting stops? Remember, warfare is just basically an extension of politics. So in the end, it always comes back to politics. And we still don't know what the political end game is for the Israeli government. Okay, you can destroy Hamas, or at least drive it underground, but who's then going to be running it? Do the Israelis then start to reoccupy Gaza? Is there an international force that will be there, or what? We just don't know. And so, yes, the death of Yahya Sinwar is important, but it's not going to change the war. My fear is that the fighting will continue.
You talk about that end game. Is the Israeli PM said that the conflict will continue. He's certainly resolute in that. But one thing that he did say that I want to ask you about was he called it the beginning of the end. Is that a sign that we're now moving into that end phase, which is, of course, what the rest of the world would love to see?
That's a Churchillian expression. This is not the beginning of the end, but it's the end of the beginning. And in a sense, Netanyahu has picked up on that by simply saying, yes, we've made a lot of progress, but we've still got much more yet to do. And I think that what he wants to do is just to continue the struggle, get rid of as many of the Hamas fighters as they can, even if they are killing lots of other innocent Palestinians in the process, and is continuing to defy the United States. Remember, the Americans are very angry that apparently humanitarian aid is not fully getting through to the Palestinians living in Gaza. So the Americans are putting pressure on him. The Americans want the war to end now, because they think that the Israeli government have done well enough. But the Israeli government says, no, there's still much more we can do.
You mentioned the impact that the conflict is having and may potentially have on the US presidential election. Looking a little bit further into the future, we've got an Australian federal election. To what extent do you think it will impact voters, especially Muslim Australians in Australia? Because we've seen pro-Palestine protests, we've seen the opposition leader Peter Dutton attack the government over a perceived weakness in supporting Israel. Do you think it moves the needle much in Australia?
Well, generally speaking, foreign affairs don't play a major role in general elections in Australia. But what it might do, of course, is to simply give the Australians of Arab heritage perhaps an opportunity to make their views expressed and perhaps add also, and this is occurring already, to the community tensions in this country. Remember, the great value of Australia is when people come to this country, they forget the conflicts from which they've come from overseas and they enjoy the surf and the sand and all the rest of it. What it will do perhaps is to give Palestinian and other Arab Australians a feeling of identity and perhaps a reason to coalesce and become more active in Australian politics. So it could have a small impact, particularly in Labor constituencies where there's a large Muslim vote. Some of those people may decide now to vote Green, and that would threaten some of the Labor MPs.
Yeah, I think in some of those Western Sydney electorates, it could be quite interesting indeed. Well, foreign affairs expert Dr. Keith Suter, always fantastic and informative to get your insights on global issues, especially with this Middle East crisis still unfolding. Thank you for joining me on the Nightly Five.
Thank you, Ben.